Here is why repeal is a real possibility. Here is why repeal is a real possibility. That act was largely repealed in 1946. That act was largely repealed in 1946. The unpopular measure was completely repealed in 1887. The unpopular measure was completely repealed in 1887. This requirement was subsequently repealed in 1980. This requirement was subsequently repealed in 1980. The repeal effort gained support nationally and internationally. The repeal effort gained support nationally and internationally. The state repealed mandatory auto inspection in 1981. The state repealed mandatory auto inspection in 1981. This income tax was repealed in 1872. This income tax was repealed in 1872. Most were gradually repealed over subsequent decades. Most were gradually repealed over subsequent decades. The order was later suspended and finally repealed. The order was later suspended and finally repealed. The law was later repealed on constitutional grounds. The law was later repealed on constitutional grounds. The infamous law was repealed in 1957. The infamous law was repealed in 1957. The law had been repealed in 1987. The law had been repealed in 1987. The regulation was eventually repealed in 1927. The regulation was eventually repealed in 1927. The likelihood of its repeal is very remote. The likelihood of its repeal is very remote. It was enforced until its repeal in 1988. It was enforced until its repeal in 1988. The reduction in tax revenues from repeal is relatively large. The reduction in tax revenues from repeal is relatively large. It was never again to be repealed. It was never again to be repealed. The legislation enacted provided for repeal in 1988. The legislation enacted provided for repeal in 1988. The tax continued until it was repealed in 1924. The tax continued until it was repealed in 1924.